On July 15, 2023, a worried family stood outside a house in Ajah, Lagos. Something wasn't right. For days, 21-year-old Augusta Onuwakbagbe had been sending messages, but she wasn't answering phone calls. And to most people, that might not seem unusual, but to her family, it was terrifying because Augusta always answered. The young university student was close to her mother, close to her friends, close to her family, and suddenly it felt as though she had vanished. As concern grew, relatives traced her last known location to the home of her boyfriend, a social media personality known online as Killer Boy. His real name was Benjamin Best Inyariko. The family arrived hoping for answers, and instead they found silence. The gate was locked and no one answered the door. Yet something immediately caught their attention. Augusta's car was still parked outside. The keys had been left behind, and it was as if she had arrived but never left. Hours passed and calls went unanswered, and the family became increasingly desperate. Eventually, a ladder was brought to the property, and a relative climbed up and looked through an upstairs window. What he saw would change everything. Inside the room lay Augusta, motionless, surrounded by blood, and the young woman her family had been searching for was dead. The discovery sent shock waves across Lagos. What had begun as a missing person concern had suddenly become a homicide investigation, and the man at the center of it all was nowhere to be found. But to understand why this case captured national attention, you have to understand who these people were. You first have to understand who Augusta was. Friends described her as vibrant, ambitious, and full of life. At just 21 years old, she was already building a growing presence online. Augusta loved fashion, she loved beauty, she loved expressing herself through her personal style. Her social media pages reflected the life of a young woman who was confident, creative, and excited about the future. Whether she was posting photographs with friends, sharing special moments, or documenting her latest fashion looks, Augusta carried herself with the energy of someone whose best years were still ahead of her. She had dreams, plans, goals she was actively working towards, and standing beside her for much of that journey was her boyfriend, Benjamin Best Inyariko, known online as Killer Boy. To many followers, the pair looked like the perfect young couple. Their social media accounts painted a picture of romance, adventure, and success. There were photos together, videos together, luxury restaurants, beautiful hotels, and trips that suggested a lifestyle many young people admired. Benjamin himself projected the image of a man living well beyond his years. He appeared successful, he was confident and well connected. Online, he showcased designer clothing, luxury experiences, expensive nights out, and a lifestyle that attracted attention. To outsiders, he looked like a young man who had everything under control. Together, Augusta and Benjamin appeared inseparable. Followers watched them travel. They celebrated milestones together and created memories that looked straight out of a modern love story. For many people, looking at their social media pages, they seemed happy and in love. But social media is often a carefully edited highlight reel. It shows the vacation, the expensive dinners, the smiling photograph. But what it doesn't show are the arguments that happen when the cameras are turned off, the disagreements behind closed doors, and the tensions that never make it into Instagram posts. And according to people close to the couple, their relationship was far more complicated than it appeared online. There were disagreements, period of separation, attempts to reconcile, moments when things appeared to be improving only for new conflicts to emerge. The cracks in the relationship were hidden from most of the public, but they were there, growing quietly beneath the surface. And as July 2023 approached, the relationship that had once looked so glamorous online was moving towards a very devastating ending. Neither Augusta's family nor her friends could have imagined that many of those photographs would soon become memorial tributes. That the smiling young woman in those pictures would soon be gone, and that the man standing beside her would become the focus of one of Nigeria's most shocking murder investigation. And then, On July 15, 2023, a worried family stood outside a house in Ajah, Lagos. At first, her family tried not to panic. Maybe her phone battery had died. Maybe she was busy. And maybe she simply needed some time to herself. But as the hours passed, those explanations became harder to believe. The messages they were receiving didn't feel right. Something seemed off. The responses were unusually short and detached, and it was almost as though someone was trying to create the impression that everything was normal. But Augusta's family knew her, and their instincts told them something was wrong. As concern turned into fear, they began trying to piece together her last known movements. Again and again, their search led them to the same place, the house in Ajah where she had been staying with Benjamin. She had previously told her mother that she was going to see Benjamin to sort things out, but her mother had not heard anything from her after that. So, when the family arrived at Benjamin's house, they expected answers, but instead, they were met with silence. There was no response from inside, no sign of Augusta, no sign of Benjamin, and yet Augusta's car remained outside the property, a detail that immediately raised alarm bells. If she had left willingly, why was her car still there, and where was Benjamin? The longer they waited, the worse the situation felt. Eventually, the decision was made to enter the property. A ladder was brought. One of Augusta's relatives carefully climbed towards an upstairs window, and the family watched from below, just hoping and praying and expecting to finally see Augusta safely inside. Instead, they witnessed every family's worst nightmare. Inside the room was Augusta. She was motionless and covered in blood. The young woman they had been desperately searching for was dead. In an instant, a missing person concern became a homicide investigation. Police were called to the scene. Officers secured the property and began collecting evidence. News of the discovery spread like wildfire. What made the situation even more shocking was the absence of the one person investigators desperately wanted to talk to, Benjamin himself, aka Killer Boy. He was nowhere to be found. As detectives worked to reconstruct the final hours of Augusta's life, they focused on the timeline leading up to her death. Witnesses were interviewed, phone calls were examined, and digital communications were reviewed. Investigators wanted to understand what had happened inside that house, and more importantly, why. Then, the story took a turn that nobody expected. As news of Augusta's death spread across social media, messages began appearing online that appeared to be coming directly from Killer Boy himself. At first, people thought the screenshots were fake, but as more accounts shared them, the post quickly went viral across Nigeria. In the messages, Benjamin claimed that he and Augusta had gotten into an argument. He wrote that during the fight, he had mistakenly stabbed her. Like, pause. How do you mistakenly stab your girlfriend? But that's what Killer Boy said happened. He said he panicked and he ran away out of fear. He claimed that he had been struggling with guilt and thoughts of ending his own ever since. And then came the part that left many people stoned. Benjamin wrote that Augusta was the person he cherished most and the person he loved the most, and she was the person he had now lost forever. But Benjamin, you took Augusta away from her family forever. Well, he said he intended to surrender himself to the authorities and face the consequences of his actions. At first, many people believed Benjamin. They believed that Killer Boy would eventually do what he claimed he was going to do. He was going to turn himself in and face the consequences. And he was going to give Augusta's family the answers that they desperately deserved. But days passed, and then weeks, and then months, but there was still no sign of him. Killer Boy had not turned himself in at any police station. Instead of surrendering, Killer Boy had disappeared. And for Augusta's family, the pain only deepened. Augusta's family spoke publicly about her daughter's death and shared her own suspicions about what may have happened. In interviews, she questioned whether her daughter's killing may have involved motives that were beyond what had been publicly disclosed. She expressed concerns that her daughter could have been targeted for ritual purposes, and this was a belief that resonated with many Nigerians who were already discussing this case online. The allegations quickly spread across social media. Comment sections filled with speculation. Every true crime blogger was talking about this case. Some people believed that there was more to the story than a domestic dispute. Others argued that there was no evidence supporting this claim. Some people went as far as claiming that parts of her body parts were missing at the time her family found her. As public debate intensified, investigators remained focused on the evidence they could verify: the crime scene, witness testimony from Augusta's mother, who had claimed that Augusta had gone to settle a relationship dispute with her boyfriend that day, digital recordings, forensic findings, and the timeline that led up to Augusta's death. While the ritual allegations became one of the most talked about aspects of the case online, they remained allegations and were not established as proven fact in court. Yet, for Augusta's mother, the question never disappeared. Meanwhile, the man at the center of the case remained on the run. Augusta's family faced a reality no family should ever have to endure. They had to prepare for her burial. The young woman whose future had once seemed limitless was now being laid to rest. Friends, relatives, classmates, and supporters all gathered to say goodbye. For days, social media had been flooded with photographs of Augusta smiling, living her life. Now, those same photographs were appearing in tribute videos and memorial posts. The contrast was heartbreaking. Just weeks earlier, she had been making plans for the future, and now people were gathering to mourn her. For Augusta's mother, the pain was unimaginable. A parent is never supposed to bury their child. Yet, there she was, saying goodbye to the daughter she had loved, protected, and dreamed alongside for 21 years. As tributes continued, one message appeared again and again: justice for Augusta. The words could be seen across social media and among those attending the burial. For many people, the fact that the man at the center of this investigation was still missing made the grief even harder to bear. The funeral may have marked the end of Augusta's journey, but it was far from the end of the story. In fact, this was only just beginning. While family members mourned, investigators were quietly following leads and piecing together a trail that stretched far beyond the borders of Nigeria. The man they were looking for had vanished, but he hadn't vanished without leaving clues. And over time, those clues would lead investigators on a pursuit spanning multiple countries, false identities, arrests, and dramatic escapes. The question was no longer what happened to Augusta. The question now was simple: where was Killer Boy, and how long could he keep running? For a time, it seemed as though Benjamin had accomplished the impossible. Nigeria's most wanted fugitive had disappeared. But while Killer Boy may have been hiding from the public, investigators claimed he was leaving behind a trail. Every journey creates records, and every border crossing creates data, and every identity leaves traces. And according to authorities, those traces became the key to finding him. As the months passed, investigators began working with international law enforcement agencies, and information was shared across borders. Sightings were investigated, and slowly a picture began to emerge. Authorities alleged that Benjamin had traveled through multiple countries while attempting to avoid capture. Each new lead pushed investigators closer. But Benjamin's greatest challenge wasn't simply avoiding the police, it was avoiding himself. Because life on the run is not the same as life online. There are no luxury photographs on the run, no glamorous holidays, no social media highlights, and no audience. And for somebody who has spent a large portion of his life being addicted to social media, this was a problem. According to investigators, mistakes eventually began to appear. Documents, travel records, identity information, small pieces of information that may have seemed insignificant on their own, but when combined, they helped authorities build a clearer picture of his movements. And then came one of the biggest developments in the case. Authorities announced that Benjamin had been located in Sierra Leone. After months of searching, the man at the center of the investigation was finally in custody. For Augusta's family, the news from Sierra Leone felt like the breakthrough they had been praying for. After months on the run, Killer Boy had finally been found. The man at the center of one of Nigeria's most talked about murder investigations was now in custody. For the first time since Augusta's death, it felt as though justice was finally catching up. Social media erupted, news outlets carried the story, and many people believed that the long chase was over. All that remained was bringing him back to Nigeria to face the consequences of his actions. But fate had other plans. Just weeks after his arrest, reports emerged that Benjamin had escaped during a prison break in Sierra Leone. The news was almost unbelievable. The man authorities had spent months tracking had vanished once again. For Augusta's family, it was another devastating blow. The hope they had briefly felt was replaced with fresh uncertainty. How could someone who had already been captured disappear again? Across social media, frustration exploded and people questioned how it could happen. Others feared that he might never be found. And with every passing day, the case seemed to become even more complicated. But while Benjamin may have escaped custody, he hadn't escaped the investigation because authorities continued following leads. They continued tracking movements and they continued sharing intelligence across borders. One thing investigators understood was this: nobody could run forever, especially not someone that was accustomed to being seen and living lavishly. And before Augusta's death, Benjamin had built much of his identity around visibility, attention, and status, the appearance of a lavish lifestyle and the image. But life on the run is very different. According to investigators, Benjamin allegedly moved through different countries using false identities in an attempt to remain hidden. For a while, it appeared to work. Months became years and the headlines became less frequent. Public attention began shifting elsewhere, and perhaps that was exactly what Benjamin was hoping for, that people would forget and that the case would slowly fade away. But Augusta's family never forgot, especially her mother. Her mother was determined to get justice for her daughter, and behind the scenes the investigation continued. And then, nearly 2 years after Augusta's death, investigators received the breakthrough they had been waiting for. According to authorities, Killer Boy had surfaced in Qatar under another identity, but this time investigators had something they hadn't had before: a trail that was strong enough to verify exactly who he was. Under international cooperation and biometric identification, authorities were able to confirm the identity of the man they had spent years pursuing. The chase was finally over, and in February 2025, Benjamin was arrested once again. Only this time, there would be no more escape, no disappearing into the shadows. The years of running had finally come to an end. For Augusta's family, the moment brought mixed emotions: relief that he had been found and relief that justice could now be served. But as the trial moved forward, attention inevitably returned to Killer Boy. For years, he had been known online for a lifestyle many young people admired, a lifestyle that appeared successful and exciting. But in the end, that same image became part of his downfall. What began as a life in the spotlight ended up as a life on the run, and despite the distance he traveled, he could never outrun the case that followed him. For Augusta's family, however, this story was never really about Killer Boy. It was about Augusta. It was about a young woman with dreams, a daughter who was loved, and someone whose life was cut short far too soon. Today, many people remember the confession, the manhunt, and the international arrest across several borders. But those who love Augusta remember something much simpler: her ambition, her kindness, and the future she should have had. Because while one person spent years trying to escape the consequences of the past, Augusta never got the chance to see her future. And that's the tragedy at the heart of this story. Not the headlines, not the chase, but the life that was lost. Because sometimes the most dangerous monsters don't hide in the dark. Sometimes they laugh with us, sometimes they build dreams with us. And by the time we discover who they truly are, it's already too late. This was the story of Augusta, and this is the monster under the bed. This is the story of Augusta Onuagbagbe. One life lost, one life forever changed, and a case that Nigeria will not soon forget. This is the monster under the bed.